Hi, my name is Quentin Anthony Anderson. I'm a Democratic candidate for Congress here in Louisiana's 6th Congressional District. The reason why I'm running is because I think that this job, at the federal level, but also at the state and local level, the job of representative, if done right, should be the most selfless job in government. It is a job that requires you, again, if done right, in a textbook sort of setting, to put your interests to the side and to represent the interests of the communities that are in your district, the constituencies that you serve. I think that the most important skill of that job is to listen. And that's really what I'm bringing to the table is I want to be a willing listener. I want to be a willing partner. And that's why I'm running, because I want to represent this district as a partner to the constituents. Well, I think the uniqueness of any representative's background always kind of qualifies them. I think that this is, I mentioned it, it should be one of the most grassroots jobs in government. I think that it should not be weird in the future for a couple people that you work with at your job to have done a couple years in Congress, because I think that it's supposed to be the most reflective of the people. It's supposed to have a bunch of teachers, preachers, farmers, regular folks that are representing the interests of regular folks on a regular basis. I'm a small business owner. I've been a small business owner since I got out of law school, but I'm not like, I'm not the fancy small business owner. I don't try to front. I'm the non-fancy small business owner that, my small business is my primary hustle and my full-time job is my side hustle. I'm still trying to scale, right? I'm still taking on clients after work. After 5 p.m., I'm taking on clients. I know that life. I know that struggle. And so I think that uniqueness, where it's not that I represent the perspective of big business or having ever worked in big business. I represent the perspective of small business owners who are clawing and scraping, who are struggling to get access to capital, who sometimes have to DIY it, sometimes have to do it after hours, have to give up their weekends, who are fighting for that long-term dream and who don't feel limited by their current circumstances, just have to hustle, have to be resourceful. That's the perspective that I bring, particularly from an entrepreneurial background. And I think that that's useful because that then says that, for those that are in similar situations, I kind of understand that perspective when we're in DC. I understand, all right, these are the resources that not only are needed by these small business owners, but this is the difficulty that many of these small business owners are having getting access to it. So not only connecting people to the resources that I think that you need based on my own personal experience and perspective, but also knowing the obstacles that you're going through and sort of trying to ease that access, trying to make pathways to that access that are practical and aren't just textbook. Don't just sort of say, well, technically the money's there, but also following through on the responsibility of connecting the people that need it to those resources. Well, I'm campaigning, and I'm not just campaigning, after filing in July. I've been in this race really unofficially since February, but officially since March. And part of the reason for that, outside of the fact that I'm not the rich candidate, I'm not the one with the biggest name recognition, so I needed that runway. But the other part of it, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's one of the reasons why I'm running is because I think that to be a good representative, you need to hold court with your constituencies. You need to listen to them. You need to go in, and sometimes it can be political gamesmanship to say I'm doing a listening tour because it just sounds good. But particularly in this job, if I don't listen to you, I don't know what I'm doing in DC, right? I'm just in DC sort of flailing my arms, or worse, pursuing personal ambition and a personal agenda. Since I've been in this race, I've been in all 10 parishes. I've tried to meet with community leaders, political leaders, elected leaders, people that hopefully, if elected, I'll have to work with and partner with on the other side of this to make sure that anything that I'm securing at the federal level is actually making its way to the people. So I consult with people. I'm happy to be here with the Shreveport Chamber, and I was telling them before we started recording that, it's organizations like this, it's advocacy groups that are the key to me being an informed member of Congress. It's you all's expertise and perspectives. It's your members' expertise and perspectives that I have to solicit. So whether I'm in North Louisiana, Central Louisiana, or Southeast Louisiana, I can only bring so much personally to the table in terms of perspective and background. I lean on these groups that represent the people that are closest to the issues, the pain, the obstacles, the aspirations, the dreams, the goals of our community. I lean on them to know exactly not only what it is that I'm fighting for, but how best to get those solutions to the people that they represent. Well, I guess I'll answer it sort of in reverse. Well, I guess it's all kind of encompassed. So in Northwest Louisiana, one of the things that I've heard the most in terms of excitement about this district is that when you have real representation, now all of a sudden some of these big federal bills that have federal resources like the Build Back Better bill, now you have a friend in high places that makes sure that some of those projects actually come directly to you. And when you don't have somebody that is supportive of that legislation, that believes in the effects and the outcomes that that legislation is shooting for, you won't have somebody that's fighting for your community to get a slice of that pie because ideologically they didn't believe in that pie in the first place. That doesn't stop them from later on, showing up at the ribbon cuttings and stuff like that and saying that, like, look at what I got for you. But it's different when they believed in it from the start. And so they are fighting for more funding for Shreveport's downtown. They are fighting for more funding for the schools to have resources so that teachers aren't having to come out of pocket for pencils, pens, and pencil pouches and things like that. When you have a friend in high places that believes in the legislation that's being passed, you get a little bit more of that. So in North Louisiana, what I've heard is just excitement about finally being able to get some of that infrastructure money, finally being able to, they always talk about what they see from Troy Carter down south. They want some of that. They want those ribbon cuttings up here. In Central Louisiana, what folks have asked me is, what is my commitment to reauthorizing the Farm Bill? And I am completely committed to reauthorizing the Farm Bill, but there are also some provisions in the Farm Bill that I'd like to see us really grow on. I'd like to see the USDA become a stronger and more long-term partner to family farms who often have difficulty having access to supermarkets and things like that. They just don't have the scale. They're getting sort of boxed out of that market by these big commercial farms. How do we provide a consistent partner so that these families can continue what they've done generationally, but they have security? And in Southeast Louisiana, flooding has been one of the top issues, whether you're talking about insurance rates and making sure that we're not, not to use a pun, but not flooding our market with really crap insurers that will give you a cheap rate, but then when the crisis comes, you're going to be coming out of pocket more than you ever thought that you would, or you may not qualify. Making sure that we're protecting homeowners and constituents down there from predatory insurance companies, but also making sure that we're doing the things from an infrastructure perspective, investing in drainage, real drainage, not just sort of like digging some holes and hoping for the best, but actually investing the millions and billions of dollars that you actually need if you're going to be a city on the front lines of the climate crisis to being able to withstand some of these increasingly volatile storms. So infrastructure has been huge on it. It just sort of looks really different in the different places, but making sure, and it's kind of old school, that their congressperson is bringing home the bacon, but relative to the specific areas and needs of those communities. Well, I mean, I don't want to overcomplicate it. I think the job of a congressperson is not to negotiate on behalf of the other 434 people that are there. That's their job. Their job is to represent their districts and to fight as hard as they can. What I would do for anything that is dependent upon federal support and consistent federal support is it is a over my dead body sort of thing. These assets in our district are critical, but nobody outside of our district knows that unless the representative is banging the table on behalf of those things. It's very easy. I mean, I remember, it's going to sound like a weird analogy, but I remember there was like an episode of House of Cards where Frank Underwood convinced his little puppet to let a Navy shipyard get closed down because it was part of this bigger sort of plan, the party agenda. I'm not part of the party agenda. I'm not the party's endorsed candidate. So for me, my agenda is the people. So when a party leader approaches me and says, look, we need to, we need to lower our funding for Barksdale Air Force Base, or worse, we need to shut down Barksdale. For me, that doesn't make any sense because I'm not part of this broader agenda where that does make sense. All I represent is Shreveport to Baton Rouge. So for me, shutting down Barksdale is an existential crisis for my district. So I'm never going to be in support of that. I'm always going to be a strong champion of the things that in this district are dependent upon federal resources, not just federal resources, but the long-term security of those federal dollars. Okay, so this is actually a good opportunity. So this is an issue that I am not as familiar with, the particular specifics that you just mentioned. So I would need to know more about it to be able to know whether I support it. I'd need to know some of the ecological information. I'd need to know the studies that are done, if there is any sort of climate or environmental impact on that. But I do agree that the Red River has a lot of opportunities that are untapped. And that we need to be balancing both the environmental precautions, the communities that are on the Red River, but also making sure that we are maximizing our economic opportunities, that we are taking advantage of the things that we have in this district, in this community, that could be doing more as economic drivers, as opposed to sort of relying on certain industries that are starting to fade out. We need to start to maximize our potential. And so on this issue, I'd love a partner like the Shreveport Chamber to talk to you all and learn more about this issue and what the pros and cons are. But I can't see myself being against progress. Okay, I actually love this question. So two ways. One, I am a big proponent of renewable energy. And for me, it's kind of twofold. I am a believer in climate change, and there are some of you that rolled your eyes as soon as I said that. That's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to convince people. If you believe the sky is red, that's okay. I do think that we are kind of past the point of trying to convince people of those things. I'm at a place now where when I can figure out a way to get you on board for the solution and it doesn't require you to believe in what I believe in, that excites me. So I'm really big on something called universal net metering. What that would allow is the energy that you produce on your property, you get paid for. That, for example, if you have solar panels on your roof, universal net metering would mean that your local utility has to pay you for the electricity that you are now putting back into the grid. So now for most homes, you're not going to eliminate your utility bill, but you might chop off 20, 30 bucks. But if you have enough property, you might be able to not only eliminate your utility bill, but they might have to actually write you a check. I am a big believer in energy democracy, and that's part of that. So I want to see us expanding our renewable energy portfolio. I want to see us doing more to not be as reliant on certain industries. That being said, what I am also mindful of, and it's one of the things that I love about climate organizing down in the South, is most of us are big believers in a just transition. And what that means is recognizing that as existential as the crisis of climate change is, and as urgent as it is for us to implement the solutions necessary to mitigating the worst effects of it, we also can't ignore the fact that there are real people here. There are people that work in these industries. There are realities of what it looks like to phase out or to phase down an industry. For example, I'd be lying to you if I told you that if we shut down this one chemical plant, but then we start up this solar farm, that everybody that got laid off at the chemical plant is going to get a one-to-one transfer of a job at the solar farm. That would be lying to you. I'd be lying to you if I told you that a 55-year-old who has worked at a plant for 30 years is suddenly going to be just as attractive as a 21-year-old fresh out of college at at a renewable energy company. I'd be lying to you. And so our solutions have to take that reality into account. We can't leave people behind. And so if that does mean that we have to take on some of the effects of climate change, because we also have to take into account that balance of making sure that we're getting people, we're taking care of people and prioritizing people's interests and making sure that people are putting food on their tables and they're keeping a roof over their head, then so be it. But we still have to operate with that urgency. So I don't see a scenario where the petro industry is phased out completely, but I do see a future where the petro industry is but a part of that portfolio of our is but a part of that energy portfolio in the United States. Well, I think that in the same way that we fought at the federal level to make access to basic health care not only affordable but universal, and for the same reasons, for the societal impacts, the healthcare impacts, all of those things. I think you can make that same argument for early childhood development and care and support for families. I think that the federal government does need to be more proactive about not only making these resources available, but making pathways to access available. And that's kind of a consistent ideology for me, is that if I believe that the federal government, if I believe that you have a right to something, then the federal government has an obligation to make pathways to that right, regardless of your ability to pay. If you can pay for it, then you should pay for it. But if you can't, and we know that it is a value added, it's an economic value added, it's a societal value added, it's a civic value added, then the federal government has an obligation to putting its money where its mouth is. And we can't just say that these things are critical to our long-term economic success and competitiveness on the global market. We have to fund that. And so that would be a value that I would fight for consistently. Well, that's quite a few issues. I will say this, like, if we're going to be very general, a few principles. One, America does not need to be the world's police. I don't believe that. I've never believed that. In fact, I think that maybe the most critical foreign policy mistake of my lifetime was our invasion of Iraq, primarily because regardless of if you believed in the values and principles that led us there, you should never send American troops, American men and women, sons and daughters of the folks here at home to fight someone else's war. If it's not an existential crisis to the United States, if we're not facing a threat, if we haven't been attacked, it is immoral to have your son, your daughter go fight on behalf of somebody else's war. I just don't believe in that. What I do believe, though, is that we have other ways of utilizing our power, our economic power, our soft power, if you will, to influencing world affairs and to trying to bring both allies and enemies closer to what we believe to be core human values, human rights values and principles. I believe in trying to get countries like China and India to respecting human labor laws, to starting to pay people a fair wage. As of right now, they are manipulating the market. In the United States, our workers and our consumers are paying a fee or a penalty, if you will, for us living our values. And what that's often doing, as you have bad actors like China in the market sort of undercutting the labor market, what that's doing is it's starting to make some of our folks here at home question our values. Because from their perspective, if believing that somebody should be paid a living wage means that I have to pay $5, $10 more for a product, they start weighing that. Is the cost of living worth the standard of living for the workers who are providing that for me. So I do believe that we have to be more aggressive about trying to push for universal labor laws, universal labor standards, not just because of the fairness in the market, but also I think that it's the moral imperative. And then finally, I am not a big believer in trade wars. I'm not a big believer in tariffs. And I know that I bring this up because I think that it's relevant in the current environment that we're in. I think that Democrats and Republicans have this fight right now. Tariffs often push that cost is often pushed to the consumer. So I think that it just sort of becomes an immature tool for our geopolitics. What I am in favor of is figuring out ways that we can make our own workforce more competitive. So that means investing in education, investing in higher education standards, so that when our kids are graduating, they are competitive on the global market. But I'm not in favor of sort of artificially trying to create that competitiveness by just sort of putting fines and taxes on top of products that come into the United States. They'll do the same to us. Well, I've said during this campaign, one of the things that I really do believe in is something called regular order. And what regular order is, I like to call it going back to schoolhouse rock basics. It means that bills in Congress originate in committee. If you're able to get the amount of votes that you need to pass it out of committee, it automatically gets a vote on the floor. We just saw this sort of play out in sort of the negative way of how hard it is to get very popular bills that would actually help people's lives to the floor in our current system. In fact, the current congressman for the 6th district, not this geographic 6th district, but the current incumbent who's retiring, his sort of legacy item was getting, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's the Social Security Fairness Act passed. He and a representative out of Virginia, Democrat, had over 300 co-sponsors. That is more than enough to pass it. So having co-sponsors, having that many co-sponsors is insane. And yet they could not get it to the floor because in our current Congress, almost every bill that gets voted on in the floor is determined by leadership. Half of it doesn't even get negotiated in committee. It gets negotiated by leadership. We don't really pass bills. We'll pass continuing resolutions. Every blue moon we might pass a budget. But what ends up happening is when it's always done by leadership, it does not reflect the interests of the districts or the representatives that represent those districts. And that means that, yeah, some of these bills do sound like they were written by somebody that just sort of has a caricature of what your community looks like as opposed to somebody that's actually rooted in it. Being an advocate for that, I think, would have a lot of bipartisan appeal, because I think a lot of representatives, regardless of if you agree with their ideology or their agenda or not, do want to go to Congress to get something done. Some of them have some crazy bills that they would like to introduce. They should have the right to be able to introduce it. We should not be circumventing democracy. Party leadership, whether you're Democrat or Republican, shouldn't be circumventing democracy because you think, well, if this bill makes it to the floor, it either screws with our agenda or it makes us look bad, or boy, like what would the outcome of it be? That's how democracy works. Democracy is a little bit messy. Democracy sometimes is unpredictable. That is one of the costs of it. You just take that. If you have a bill that you're afraid of that has a lot of momentum, it is on the opposition to figure out how to kill that bill. It is not on sort of the institution of Congress to circumvent the ability for that bill to ever see the light of day. And then the other thing is just kind of my approach to politics. The only thing I don't respect is extreme ideology, and for me, or extreme tactics. I don't care what your ideology is. I care about your tactics. If your approach is somehow that you out of 435 representatives, you're going to get 100% of what you want, that to me is extreme. I think that every representative, when you're pushing your bill, you need to figure out how to address my interests with the thing that you're trying to push. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not always going to get 100% of what I want. Most of the time, I'm not going to get 50% of what I want. But if I can kind of make a career out of getting 10, 20% here and there, that to me is success. And that to me, I think, is the bipartisan spirit that Congress is supposed to operate in. Well, yeah, I think that there's relevant experience as well to this. I know that I have sort of cut the figure of the new, fresh, young candidate, and so change is kind of the word association. But I also don't want people to think that I'm applying for this job not knowing what's required. In 2015, I served as campaign director for the Campaign for Common Sense School Discipline Reform. Long story short, we were trying to reform what's called the school to prison pipeline, where in some communities they suspend and expel kids at such a rate that they're not really taking into account what the long-term consequences of those suspensions and expulsions are. So we were trying to change that. And it was, admittedly, progressive legislation that we were trying to get passed. But what I was brought on board for was to get people to vote for it that weren't progressive. The value of the bill remained the same, but how we talked about it, how we got support for it was so important. And the folks who hired me knew that what was not an option was no progress. We couldn't just sort of run perpetually. We could not let the bill fail. We needed to pass. So they told me, all right, Q, go and get some moderate support. Go and get some Republican support. Figure out how you get this Republican governor to sign this bill. And my job was to figure out, how do I make this bill speak to the various interests that were around the table? In fact, we had an even harder call to action. We were told that there could be no organizational opposition to our bill. So I had to figure out how to massage those different interests into our bill. But it's that experience, that understanding that if I know that the people that are counting on me won't accept anything, won't accept nothing. They do need some progress, whether I can move the needle an inch or a mile. Then my approach is always, let me figure out, how do I make what I'm fighting for in the interest of the people that I need their support? I'm a pragmatist. Am I progressive? Probably. Even though I think some progressives might think that I'm not pure enough, and some conservatives might think that I'm way too progressive. I'm not trying to be the most anything. I'm just trying to be productive. I'm trying to bring progress back. And that's why I'm running. At the end of the day, it's not good enough just to vote for somebody that offers you racial representation or offers you even geographical representation. It's important to vote for somebody that shows the willingness to actually do the job, that shows the willingness to take positions on issues, that shows the willingness to listen. I've done that throughout my career. And most importantly, what I've never settled for is failure. I may not govern the way that you would govern. I may not govern the way your ideal candidate in a perfect world would govern. But the one thing that I can absolutely tell you is that I will be accessible. I will be transparent, and I'll be accountable. I want to do this job because I want to serve you. I have no other agenda. I am running because I think that you deserve better representation than what I think the other options present to you. So thank you guys for having me.